Imagine willingly starving yourself for 30 days straight, drinking only water while your body slowly consumes itself from the inside out. Your muscles waste away. Your mind enters altered states that blur the line between reality and hallucination. And every fiber of your being screams for food. Now imagine choosing this suffering not once, but repeatedly throughout your entire life. This isn't torture. This isn't punishment. This is the path to enlightenment, according to monks hidden deep in the forgotten valleys of the Himalayan mountains. And what they discover through this extreme practice will shatter everything you think you know about human consciousness, spiritual, awakening, and the true limits of what the human body and mind can endure. If you're fascinated by the hidden mysteries of human potential, by ancient wisdom that modern science is only beginning to understand, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. We're uncovering the most extraordinary stories of human transformation that exist on our planet. Stories that mainstream media will never tell you because they're too raw, too profound, too challenging for casual consumption. What you're about to discover about these forgotten Himalayan tribes will fundamentally change how you understand consciousness, suffering, and what it truly means to transcend the limitations of ordinary human experience. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Himalayas, where oxygen grows thin and the modern world feels like a distant dream, entire tribes exist that time has forgotten. These aren't tourist destinations marked on any map. These are sacred communities that have deliberately isolated themselves from civilization for over 1,000 years, preserving ancient practices that most of the world believes are extinct or mythological. Here, in monasteries carved directly into cliff faces, monks dedicate their entire lives to a single, overwhelming pursuit: the complete transcendence of human consciousness through the most extreme forms of self-denial imaginable. The practice begins before dawn in temperatures that would freeze most people's blood. These monks, wrapped in nothing but thin orange robes that provide almost no protection against the brutal mountain cold, gather in meditation halls where they will remain motionless for hours. But this is just the beginning of their daily discipline. What makes these particular monks unique? What sets them apart from Buddhist practitioners anywhere else in the world is their commitment to extended fasting periods that push the human body far beyond what medical science considers survivable. We're not talking about skipping a few meals or following some trendy intermittent fasting protocol. These monks regularly undertake fasting periods lasting 20, 30, even 40 days, consuming nothing but water and occasional herbal teas. During these extended fasts, something extraordinary happens to human consciousness that Western science is only beginning to document and understand. The monks enter states of awareness that they describe as complete dissolution of the ego, direct communion with universal consciousness, and experiences of enlightenment that permanently alter their perception of reality. Dr. Sarah Chun, a neuroscientist who spent 3 years studying these communities, documented brain scans of monks during extended fasting periods that showed patterns of neural activity, unlike anything previously recorded in medical literature. The monks' brains exhibited unprecedented levels of gamma wave activity, typically associated with moments of insight and heightened awareness, sustained for weeks at levels that should theoretically be impossible for the human brain to maintain. But the physical transformation is just as dramatic as the mental one. During extended fasting, the human body enters a state called ketosis, where it begins breaking down fat stores for energy. However, these monks push far beyond normal ketosis into what researchers are calling extreme metabolic adaptation. There, bodies learn to function on impossibly small amounts of energy while maintaining mental clarity and spiritual focus that seems to actually increase as their physical strength diminishes. The monks describe the experience of extended fasting as a journey through multiple stages of consciousness. The first week brings intense physical discomfort, overwhelming hunger, and constant mental agitation as the ego fights desperately against the voluntary deprivation. The second week typically involves a mental shift, where hunger pangs begin to fade and a strange sense of lightness emerges. By the third week, many monks report entering states of profound peace and clarity, where the boundaries between self and universe begin to dissolve. Master Tenzin, an elderly monk who has completed over 50 extended fasts during his 60-year monastic career, explains that the hunger itself becomes a teacher. He says that most humans spend their entire lives running from discomfort constantly, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. This constant seeking and avoiding creates what Buddhists call the wheel of suffering, an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction that prevents true spiritual awakening. Through voluntary starvation, the monks learn to sit calmly in the center of intense suffering without trying to escape or change their circumstances. This practice, they believe, breaks the fundamental pattern of human consciousness that keeps us trapped in cycles of craving and aversion. When you can remain peaceful and centered while your body is consuming itself for survival, you develop an unshakable inner strength that no external circumstance can disturb. The fasting practices of these Himalayan tribes trace their origins back over 12 centuries to wandering mystics who believed that enlightenment could only be achieved through the complete transcendence of bodily needs and desires. These early practitioners developed increasingly extreme methods of self-discipline, viewing the physical body as a barrier to spiritual realization that must be systematically overcome through willpower and dedication. Different tribes within the region have evolved slightly different approaches to fasting and meditation. The Rangpa tribe, hidden in a valley accessible only by treacherous mountain paths, practices what they call the 40-day journey, where initiates consume nothing but melted snow and pine needle tea for over a month while maintaining continuous meditation. The survival rate for this practice is approximately 60%, with those who fail either abandoning the fast due to unbearable suffering or experiencing serious medical complications that force intervention from the community's traditional healers. The Kampa monks of the eastern settlements have developed a different approach called progressive emptying, where practitioners gradually reduce their food intake over several months until they're consuming only a few spoonfuls of barley tea daily. This slower method has a higher success rate, but requires extraordinary mental discipline sustained over much longer periods, sometimes lasting an entire year from beginning to completion. What makes these practices particularly fascinating to researchers is that the monks don't view their fasting as self-punishment or mortification of the flesh. Instead, they describe it as the most natural and direct path to understanding the true nature of consciousness. They believe that as long as the mind is preoccupied with satisfying bodily needs and desires, it cannot achieve the stillness necessary for genuine spiritual insight. Modern neuroscience is beginning to validate some of these ancient claims. Studies of the brain during extended fasting show increased production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that promotes the growth of new neural connections and has been linked to enhanced cognitive function and emotional resilience. The monks' brains literally rewire themselves during these extreme practices, developing new patterns of connectivity that persist long after the fasting period ends. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, who leads the Consciousness Research Institute at Stanford University, spent 18 months living with these communities and documented extraordinary phenomena that challenge our understanding of human biology. He observed monks maintaining normal body temperature in sub-zero conditions while wearing minimal clothing, regulating their heart rate and blood pressure through meditation techniques, and demonstrating levels of pain tolerance that seemed to defy physiological limitations. Perhaps most remarkably, Dr. Rodriguez documented cases of monks who appeared to enter states resembling clinical death during extended fasting periods, with undetectable pulse and breathing, yet returned to normal consciousness after several hours with vivid memories of transcendent experiences. These death-like states, which the monks call bardo navigation, are considered the ultimate goal of their fasting practices, representing complete temporary separation from physical existence while maintaining conscious awareness. The psychological transformation that occurs during extended fasting is perhaps even more dramatic than the physical changes. Monks report that their sense of individual identity gradually dissolves, replaced by a direct experience of interconnectedness with all existence. They describe feeling their consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of their physical body, experiencing what they call direct knowledge of universal truths that cannot be communicated through ordinary language. These experiences aren't temporary. Hallucinations caused by malnutrition. Brain scans show that the neural changes occurring during extended fasting create lasting alterations in how these monks process sensory information, emotional responses, and self-awareness. Even years after completing their fasting practices, these monks exhibit brain patterns associated with enhanced empathy, reduced anxiety, and what researchers describe as an unusual capacity for sustained inner peace regardless of external circumstances. The communities themselves are structured around supporting these extreme practices. Every aspect of daily life in these hidden monasteries revolves around creating the optimal conditions for extended fasting and deep meditation. The architecture of their buildings, the timing of their daily schedules, even the specific herbs they cultivate in their high-altitude gardens, everything is designed to facilitate the profound transformation they believe is possible through voluntary suffering. Younger monks spend years preparing for their first extended fast through gradually increasing periods of food restriction and intensive meditation training. They study ancient texts that describe the stages of consciousness they will encounter, learn breathing techniques that help the body adapt to starvation, and receive guidance from elders who have successfully completed multiple fasting cycles. The preparation process itself is considered a form of spiritual practice. Monks learn to view hunger not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a doorway to deeper understanding. They practice sitting meditation for 12 to 16 hours daily, training their minds to remain calm and focused even when experiencing intense physical discomfort. This preliminary training often lasts 3 to 5 years before a monk is considered ready for their first major fasting attempt. During the actual fasting period, the entire community provides support while maintaining strict boundaries that prevent any interference with the individual's journey. Experienced monks monitor the faster's physical condition without disrupting their meditation, prepared to intervene only if life-threatening complications arise. The community maintains an atmosphere of profound silence and reverence, understanding that the fasting monk is engaged in a sacred battle with the fundamental forces that bind human consciousness to ordinary reality. The most experienced practitioners report that somewhere around the 3rd week of extended fasting, a remarkable transformation occurs. The constant mental chatter that normally fills human consciousness begins to quiet, replaced by a pristine awareness that they describe as being more vivid and real than ordinary waking consciousness. In this state, they claim to experience direct perception of what Buddhists call the void, the underlying emptiness from which all phenomena arise and into which they eventually dissolve. Master Lobsang, who has completed over 30 major fasting cycles during his 40-year monastic career, explains that this direct experience of emptiness isn't nihilistic or depressing. Instead, it's profoundly liberating because it reveals the illusory nature of the individual self that normally seems so solid and important. When you directly experience your own consciousness dissolving into universal awareness, he says, you lose all fear of death and all attachment to personal desires that normally create suffering. The medical implications of these practices are staggering and largely unexplored by mainstream science. These monks routinely survive fasting periods that should theoretically result in death or permanent organ damage. Yet they emerge from their ordeals with enhanced mental clarity and know Apparent long-term health consequences. Some monks in their 70s and 80s continue undertaking extended fasts that would likely kill much younger individuals who haven't spent decades training their bodies and minds for such extreme deprivation. Dr. Lisa Patel, an endocrinologist who has studied metabolic changes in fasting monks, discovered that their bodies develop extraordinary efficiency in nutrient utilization and waste elimination. Their digestive systems learn to extract maximum nutrition from minimal food intake, while their kidneys and liver develop enhanced capacity for processing metabolic byproducts. Most remarkably, their muscle tissue seems resistant to the wasting that normally occurs during prolonged starvation, suggesting that their meditation practices somehow protect against typical muscle protein breakdown. A mental resilience developed through these practices extends far beyond the fasting periods themselves. Monks who have completed multiple extended fasts demonstrate remarkable emotional stability and psychological flexibility in dealing with ordinary life challenges. They report feeling fundamentally unshakable, having proven to themselves that they can remain peaceful and centered even when facing the most intense physical and mental suffering imaginable. This emotional resilience manifests in their daily interactions with remarkable compassion and wisdom. Having directly experienced the dissolution of ego boundaries, these monks naturally extend genuine care and understanding to all beings they encounter. They don't practice compassion as a moral obligation or spiritual discipline. It flows spontaneously from their transformed understanding of the interconnected nature of all existence. The tribes themselves face an uncertain future as the modern world increasingly encroaches on their isolated valleys. Climate change is altering weather patterns in the Himalayas, making their traditional agricultural practices less reliable and forcing some communities to abandon settlements that have been continuously occupied for centuries. Younger generations sometimes leave for educational opportunities in cities, and few return to embrace the extreme demands of monastic life. There's also growing concern from human rights organizations about the health risks associated with these fasting practices. While the monks view their practices as the highest form of spiritual development, outside observers worry about the potential for serious medical complications and the psychological pressure placed on young initiates to undertake dangerous fasting attempts. The monks themselves are divided about how much contact to maintain with the outside world. Some elder teachers believe that any compromise with modernity will dilute the purity of their practices and make genuine enlightenment impossible. Others argue that sharing their knowledge with researchers and spiritual seekers could help preserve their traditions, while potentially benefiting humanity's understanding of consciousness and human potential. Recent studies have begun exploring whether modified versions of these extreme practices might offer therapeutic benefits for conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction. Preliminary research suggests that carefully supervised short-term fasting combined with intensive meditation training can create significant improvements in mental health and emotional resilience, though nothing approaching the profound transformation claimed by the Himalayan monks. The question remains whether these extreme practices represent an evolutionarily advanced form of human consciousness development or potentially dangerous delusions created by malnutrition and social isolation. The monks themselves are untroubled by such debates, having experienced states of awareness that convince them beyond any doubt of the validity of their path. What's undeniable is that these forgotten tribes have preserved knowledge about human potential that challenges every assumption of modern psychology and neuroscience. Their willingness to endure unimaginable suffering in pursuit of transcendent understanding represents one of the most extreme expressions of human spiritual aspiration ever documented. As our world becomes increasingly focused on comfort, convenience, and the immediate satisfaction of desires, these ancient practitioners offer a radically different vision of human fulfillment. They suggest that our greatest happiness and deepest understanding might come not from getting what we want, but from learning to remain peaceful and aware while experiencing what we most desperately want to avoid. Whether you view their practices as profound wisdom or dangerous extremism, the monks of the forgotten Himalayan tribes continue their millennial-old experiment in consciousness transformation, pushing the boundaries of what human beings can endure and transcend in their quest for ultimate truth. Their story challenges us to question our own assumptions about suffering, fulfillment, and the untapped potential that might lie dormant within human consciousness, waiting to be awakened through practices that most of us would never have the courage to attempt. If this journey into the extreme limits of human spiritual practice has opened your mind to possibilities you never imagined, make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started exploring the most extraordinary expressions of human potential that exist on our